Spoken.
He lurked in the shadows, waiting and hoping she wouldn't take a different route. This was her usual room. He knew that. He knew her.
Ghost of Me, the new book by Amanda Steele, can be found at Amazon, Kobo, Waterstones, and many, many other places. Hi guys, it's Andy N. Thanks today for downloading or streaming yet another episode of Spoken Label. As you may or may not be aware, Spoken Label was started in the beginning of 2006, and currently we have well over 150 sessions recorded since then. Although you can find it on various networks, the full archive is available for streaming and downloading at Spoken Label bandcamp.com. It is a free download or free stream in there, but obviously, if you feel like chucking me a few pennies that way, it'd be eternally grateful to help me keep this podcast going and keep improving my equipment, etc. Enjoy. Speak to you soon. Bye bye. Spoken Label.
Hi guys, Andy N, Spoken Label, back in the house. We're over in Zoom land again today. Kudos to my good friend Rosie today, and Rosie has sent over to me and other friends today. And I've got a gentleman with me called Stephen Coates. Stephen, I actually knew already, is with a band, and the band, of course, is the Real Tuesday Weld. But we're going to talk to Stephen about his upcoming first start of a trilogy of last albums of this project and other bits and pieces. So, Stephen, would you like to introduce yourself first to everybody? Tell them obviously a little bit about yourself, where all your creativity came from, and we'll take it from there.
Well, hi, Andy, and thanks for having me on the show. You were just saying before that this is your 200 and something. That's absolutely amazing. So I'm really pleased to be here.
Knackering.
So I'm Stephen Coates. I'm in the Real Tuesday Weld, which is a band, and we've been going for about 20 years. And, people say, what does that mean, the Real Tuesday Weld? Well, Tuesday Weld is or was an American actress, as we used to say. And she's still alive, but she doesn't act anymore. And the reason that I call the band the Real Tuesday Weld is that when I was thinking about starting up as a band, I had these three very powerful dreams at the time. And one of those dreams was about the actor Tuesday Weld. I think it was because when I was a kid, I saw a film called The Cincinnati Kid with Steve McQueen and her in it. And it really landed with me, that film, when I was very small. I don't know why. She must have stuck in my mind. Anyway, so it popped in. I thought, what's an interesting name, Tuesday Weld. So for a while, actually, I was just called Tuesday Weld. And then we thought, well, people are going to get confused. I don't know how they get confused between a glamorous American actor and me. But just in case they did, we decided to call it the Real Tuesday Weld. So that's how it all started. And that was a hell of a long time ago.
Wow. I've seen the film, actually. I saw that when I was at university. I was at uni 20 years ago. I remembered it well. I thought it was a really good film it was at the time. And that's when I remember first hearing about your band some years ago, and I thought to myself, what a name for a band. Now, obviously, if people are interested in your band yourself, I know you've done quite a few albums over the years, haven't you? And what I can make out is at least 6, and the page on Wikipedia seems a bit more vague on that one. But have you found that over time with the band, has your approach to actually the albums changed much?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So I think there's probably 6 or 7, and it gets a bit complicated because I've done, as well as those, we've done like myriad EPs and singles and collaborations with other people, and a lot of collaborations with animators, actually. So for me, it's an interesting time, I think, Andy, because for me, the album, was always like a bit of a concept thing in itself, So I did an album called I, Lucifer back in the day, and that was a soundtrack to a book by a friend of mine, Glenn Duncan, who's a writer. And I, Lucifer is a soundtrack to his book. Another album I did about 10 years ago, which is called Songs for the Last Werewolf, is another soundtrack to another one of his books. It's a set of songs, but it's songs inspired or connected with the books. And then my other albums, they had a kind of rough concept. And I think that was always the thing for me, is to try and group it round a concept. Now, these days, it's quite interesting because, of course, you could say, in a sense, what is the album? You know, we live in a Spotify era, which is amazing, by the way. And you know, with the advent of iTunes and then Spotify, it's like, in some respects, the album doesn't really exist anymore. But it is a useful framework to release stuff. And so over the years, you know, I was fortunate enough to be the generation that signed to a record label. I was signed to a big indie in the UK and a big indie in America. And, you know, I sort of came out at that time when, you know, albums came out on CDs, you know, and there was a whole thing around the physical thing, you know, and I'm really pleased that I'd got that, you know, on my shelf in here somewhere. It's got all the CD stuff. And of course, it's not really like that anymore. I mean, thank God we're going through a vinyl renaissance.
Oh, yeah.
We can put stuff on vinyl, you know, because it's very difficult otherwise, even though people, and I'm one of them, don't really consume music in the way that we used to, like, you know, an album. You know, we all enjoy Spotify and stuff. It's still a useful thing for an artist, I think, to you know, conceptually to group a series of recordings. So I think it has changed a lot, and a lot of that's good, you know.
Yeah. Now, what I like about you as well is, and I'm looking back at, I don't want to go tons of detail on this. Let people discover them for yourselves. I love the fact I'm looking at all the remixes you've done over the years as well. You've done an incredible amount of variation in your remixes, like Belbertine Gilbertino, who I absolutely love, and the Pupret Sisters as well, who I saw your video you did with them as well the other day as well. As me and my partner absolutely loved Don't Get Me High, and like you've done Duke Ellington as well. Now, how have you found it with your remixing done to your albums or your projects? Is that quite a different approach for you?
Well, I'll tell you what, in some ways I would prefer it, and we'll talk about this a bit later maybe, but the thing for me is that what I always like collaborating. So if you're doing a remix, it's somebody else's track, right? And it's like, I've done quite a lot of music for films and documentaries, and then it's somebody else's project. You know, you're kind of in a way serving somebody else's vision. And I work a lot with animators, and I actually like that. The remix thing's interesting because, you know, that's you're working on somebody else's material, and actually I think that brings out a different side of the creativity. You know, you're not the boss. I mean, one of the big come downs for me, one of the big sort of you know, learning experiences, is that a few years ago I got asked to do songs for a computer game called LA Noire, right? It's a massive role-playing game, right?
Oh wow!
and you know, I got a phone call on Christmas Eve, right, from Los Angeles, and I wouldn't normally have answered it because I was with my family, but I thought, oh, Los Angeles, that could be lucrative. So I answered the phone, and it was the guy from Rockstar Games in LA, and they were doing this computer game called LA Noire. It's like set in the 40s. And his first question to me was, could you write a song about a heroin addicted jazz singer who might be a pyromaniac? And I said, totally.
Yeah, I can imagine what I know you, Stephen. That's just your cup of tea. That
I mean, the thing is, that, for me, that's ideal in a way, because it's sort of like, it was like they gave me a brief, you know what I mean? And I found it easier. So, and you know, so doing that project. But the interesting thing about that is that I've worked with quite a lot of filmmakers, and if you work in film, right, you know, it's not your project, and it doesn't really matter whether you've made a wonderful piece of music that fits this scene perfectly. Then they'll go and chop 15 seconds out of the scene, right? And you'll be like, yeah, but that's going to ruin the music. And it's like, yeah, and it's like, you know, it's your opinion doesn't really matter that much. Well, in the computer game industry, right, you're a notch lower than that, right?
Oh, wow.
So even though I was writing the songs for that computer game, you were down there with the people who are providing the sandwiches and the security. You know, it's like these guys do the security, these guys do the catering, and then there's the guy who does the music.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? And actually, that was a sort of ego-bruising experience. But actually, at the same time, I quite enjoy it. So that was a very long-winded answer to your question. But in terms of actually remixing and all that other stuff, is that I like it because in some ways it takes the pressure off. You know, it's like you've got to turn your creativity to somebody else's vision.
Yeah, I've always believed in me doing this sort of projects like that. I've done, not on the level you've done, I've always love working with people. You get something from it every time you do. Even if it doesn't go the way you want it to go, you come away with some sort of, it's experiences really, I suppose, isn't it? So,
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm sure you found this. I mean, haven't you had the experience where you've done something for somebody and great, and they've come back and said, like, not sure about that. And you're thinking, hold on a minute. But then they push you to do something else. And even though at first you might be quite resistant to it, then in the end, it's actually, yeah, ends up being better in some way because you're being pushed out of your hat. Do you know what I mean? We've all got I don't know about you, but I've got a habitual way of working. And sometimes, you know, if you're working with somebody else, they're like, well, we're not interested in that. We want to do this. And I found that generally to be a really useful way to grow a bit creatively.
Yeah, I think you have to as an artist, really. There is a natural growth with it. I think obviously you've been in a band as long as you have done now, really. The band would have grown in a natural progression over time anyway. So, and that's why, and I know you tell me lots more about the soundtracks you've done as well. So, but like you said, but interesting now, obviously, if people are interested, the Real Tuesday Weld, it's now about to enter its, you're about to get to the end of the road now, aren't you, really? So you've started up you told me already, a trilogy of new albums to finish off with. So,
right. So what happened was that I put the album Songs of the Last Werewolf, which was a few years ago now, and after that I got involved in several other projects. We carried on doing small releases, and then I was in films, and then involved in various other musical related projects for quite a long time. And then I was thinking, well, you know, what's going to happen with Real Tuesday Weld? What do I want to do with it? And I decided that I wanted to end it. And the reason is that most bands seem to just fizzle out, or they break up acrimoniously, right? Well, I can't break up acrimoniously because it's really mainly just me and Don, my bass player. You know, so I'm sort of schizophrenic to break up with myself in some way. So the other thing is you fizzle out. You know, you just one day people turn around and say, "What happened to that band?" And it's like, well, they just stopped making records. That's normally what happens. And I thought, well, I don't want to do that because I've really loved this project and I want to bring it to a definite end. And so, having recorded material over the last, you know, quite a few number of years, always recording stuff and then making new stuff now, I thought I'm going to do it and I'm going to end it quite definitely and to put out 3 albums. Originally, I wanted to put a triple album out, but I was told that that's commercial suicide, to which my response was, and? But then, so the people say it's too big a meal. It probably is too big a meal. So I'm going to space it out over 3 records, and that's it. It's done. It's not like when that's done, Andy, that I'm like not going to make music again or not be creative. No, but as a sort of thing, it'll be 20 years, and it's like that's enough. You know, move over, let somebody else have some space. You know.
Indeed, and you've got like it's you. From what I can see, you'll have other projects on the go after this anyway. So who's to say you won't do a new band or do some more film work or something under a slightly different name?
Well,
so
yeah, I want to work with people. I want to collaborate with people, you know, work on their stuff. So for sure, I'll do that. But as a sort of thing itself, Real Tuesday Weld is going to be over. Yeah.
Yeah, completely. I can see like everything comes in and naturally. Like you're not going to be like U2 going in the 90s, are you? Or the Rolling Stones.
Nobody can see us, but start.
Exactly. So no, I know what you mean with that stuff.
You don't want to go full circle. The very first gigs you do when there's like 2-3 people there, sound engineer and, you know, your brother. You don't want to end up, and you don't want to end up in the same way, do you? You know, you've gone the full circle, done the world tour, and then you end up with just your sound engineer and your brother again at the end.
No, I've done it. I ain't doing it again. my brother, who hopefully won't listen to this, isn't the best person of my art sometimes. Is the best to appreciate it. Definitely not. Now, I want to ask you also a couple of bits and pieces I've talked about today as well. I've been watching a number of your videos, and I love the way the animation has been used with them. So obviously, like I know your gigs have been like that as well. So what's made the art and animation come into your gigs a lot and your videos?
So what happened? Just really good fortune again. I mean, as I like to say, like, you know, how an email can change your life. You know, I'm still always quite keen to look at my inbox because you know, a couple of times my life has been changed by an email. And what happened is that way back after I'd done the album My Lucifer that I mentioned, I got an email from somebody. Who said, you know, my name's Alex Badovsky. I'm a Russian, and I've made an animation to one of your songs. Is that okay? And I emailed him back and said, I think so. Can I see it? And he sent me this animation, and it was for a track called Terminally Ambivalent Over You, and I was blown away. And it was just like, what? That's amazing. So, you know, we got into conversation and stuff. And then with Alex, who's Russian, but he lives in Brooklyn, or lived in Brooklyn then, we went on to do another animation called Bath Time in Clerkenwell. And that was a huge, it was a huge hit. He won loads of awards for it. And on the animation sort of festival circuit. And as a result of that, what happened is that other animators started to get in touch with me and ask me if I'd do stuff for them or if they could do stuff for me. So it really happened like that. And then I think some of the ones that you're referring to, like with the Papini sisters, and is that they're animated by George Ford, who's another American, and they've done in a kind of sort of 30s, 40s style. They take forever. It's a real labor of love that George's done. We've done 4 with him. And I hope to finish off this whole cycle with 1 more with him. So it was really just good fortune, actually, you know.
A lot of it is really this sort of thing. It's luck of the draw, as you tell me. Like I said, pick up the right phone call, stumble onto the right email. You can, who knows what'll happen? Yeah, that's great stuff. So I'm looking forward to it now. People obviously wondering that the first of the 3 albums is out on the 7th of May, which this will be released about the same date. So do you have any sort of rough ideas when the 2nd and 3rd albums are going to be on the way?
Yeah, I was planning to put the 2nd one out at the end of the year, but I think it'll probably be January now, only because of the whole COVID thing's pushed everything back in terms of getting, because they're all on vinyl as well. And so that whole COVID thing has pushed the whole production cycle back a bit. So I think January 2022 for the 2nd one, and then finish off in the autumn of 2022. Play some shows. Hopefully play some shows if we're allowed to go to gigs again by then. And then that's it. I'm free.
You're free man at last, aren't you? So yeah. Have you found that your music work, and the production, has it changed much over COVID for you then?
Right, that's a great question. I think in a strange way for me, no, because mostly I work on my own anyway with guest singers and Dom, my bass player, and live. I've had a big band up to 7 people. But generally speaking, I work in a studio on my own, so it's not changed that much actually. And in some ways, I feel really awkward saying this, but I've been saying it quite a bit. Is that lockdown has suited me quite well because I'm a bit of an introvert, and I like working and having an excuse to carry on working at all hours. And of course, when you can't go out anywhere and there's nothing to do, you know, then you don't have to make the same excuses as you normally do when people say, do you want to come out for the evening?
Yeah.
Don't get allowed to.
I can relate to that one straight away. So
you're like that. You enjoy lockdown, have you, Andy?
Not really. I'm diabetic, so I've had to stay inside and do a lot of shielding. So It's not been fun, but you've learned to adapt to different ways, I think, really. I've just
I say that, and I do feel a bit guilty because I'm not making light of it. I know it's been incredibly difficult for most people, and also I think that in terms of musicians, I think it's been incredibly painful. I mean, I'm sure like you, I've got friends, and like in fact the Papini sister, Marcella Papini, is a very good friend of mine. You know, performing for her, not only is it a way that she's made a living, but it's like in her blood. She needs to perform. She needs to play live. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's what I've seen of them, there's such a performance-based group they are, the 3 of them, straight away. So it's like,
yeah, so not actually being able to go on stage and, like, you know, interact with an audience and play her stuff live, for her is painful. You know, I've not really been in that situation. I've got to say, I am itching to get out and play, as I'm sure you are. You know, it's like I want to get out there and actually do events in you know, with people in rooms, and do that again. I'm very keen to do that. So, you know, bring it on.
No, I agree. Completely looking forward to it. Let's hope it's short soon then, definitely so. Now, the last thing I want to talk about to you today is about your podcast, which Rosie didn't tell me about, actually. So I only found out. Oh, no, I'm lying, she did. I was a bit late getting onto your podcast, Bureau of Lost Culture. So, and I've heard you, not your current episode, the one before, but Sid Barrett. But I'm going to play the guy. I'll get onto the other one when I can get a chance. But where did your podcast come from then, Bureau of Lost Culture?
Right, so that's quite a long story. So one of the things that I've been doing in the last few years since the last album came out is that we've always played in Russia a lot, right? Partly because of these Russian animators that I told you about. And when I started to go to Russia about 10 years ago, I came across a whole story about forbidden music, forbidden rock and roll and jazz in the Soviet Union in the 1950s and 60s. And that turned into a project called the X-Ray Audio Project, which people can check out, xrayaudio.com. And it's about strange records that were made in the Cold War time. And I got asked about 3 years ago to do a radio program for Soho Radio, which is a community station in London, independent. So I did a series of 5 programs on sort of Russian underground music and connected stuff. And then when that was over, I was really enjoying doing them. And then they just asked me if I wanted to carry on. And so it sort of metamorphosized into a podcast program about counterculture and underground stuff from the 50s and 60s and more recently from 70s. So it just really, a bit like, you were saying earlier, I've not done anywhere near as many of you have. I mean, I think I'm only in the sort of late 20s. But it's just telling stories, interviewing people. You were saying earlier, it's like I love hearing people's stories and particularly sort of lost stories, and that was the idea of lost culture. Maybe stories which have been a bit forgotten for some reason. With Syd Barrett, that's an interesting one for me. And the reason Syd Barrett, obviously, people probably know him, the original founder of Pink Floyd, obviously quite famous. But what was interesting was that I was interviewing a lot of people who were around in the 60s and 70s, and he kept appearing in the background like a ghost in those people's lives. That they knew him, and he almost seemed like a ghostly figure in that sort of music scene of the late 60s and 70s. And of course, what happened to him was quite tragic. So, wanted to tell that story about him. And so that's really how it came about. And it's a conversation just like this one is, but really tends to be with old people who were around in the 60s and 70s, yeah.
For our time completely, yeah, but I get you. Definitely that one. So do you obviously I can see the episodes obviously aren't like on a weekly basis, are they? They tend to come out every couple of weeks. Does that sound about right? Does it?
Yeah, 2 a month, yeah.
Yeah, 2 months. I thought that makes sense sometimes because when I'm doing these, I just chat based. But those the one I played, I'm going to go for the rest. Definitely, they sound like you can tell that they're a labour of love for you. So, when you're doing this episode, do you have a topic in mind all the time? How do you approach this? Do you have like lists of people you want to write about and research all the time? Is it, or do you just build them up one after the other?
No, I've got a list actually. I've got a list of probably like you, I've got a list going, and then suddenly I'll think of something and think I've got to get that, and it might be so. It's not really about music actually, but there's been a couple of musical things recently, and so I'd like to do. I might think, I like to do a program about like comedy in the 60s, like alternative comedy, and then try and find somebody who can talk about that, either who was doing it or at least knows about it, So I've got an interesting one coming up soon, which is about skinheads, because the interesting thing for me about skinheads is that in the 60s was that I associated it with like kind of right-wing bother boy type racists, but of course, and I think that was true, but then you start digging into it and you realize that in the 80s and 90s there were all these skinheads, like two-tone skinheads, you know what I mean, and who were like the opposite. Actually, they were kind of left-wing and sort of like, they were black and white people together and stuff like that. So I thought, well, that's an interesting subject, isn't it? Skinheads, so I've got a guy talking about skinheads.
Oh, cool. Look, if people go back to your archive, you can see you've got a wide variety of people there. Like I see Billy Bragg's names come up, and then Stephen Tintin Duffy, who I used to love his material with the Lilac Time. I saw them live when I was about 17, so very, very,
so
very
good, right? So good, right? The Lilac Time, right? I mean, so good. And he's I've got to say, I recommend that episode. He's a great guy, Stephen. Really good, yeah. Yeah,
I only found out, I think it was, I was very young when I got into them. I only found out the reference Lilac Time to Nick Drake much later on. So that's why you just do like, and I got Nick Drake much later on. So it's like, brilliant band, well worth checking out. and Billy Bragg's Billy Bragg, basically, because I know people that know Billy Bragg still. But like I said, but it's you've got really, it's a really good podcast still.
So do you know Billy Bragg yourself?
No, never met him. Right. I know people that have met him.
The interesting thing for me with that, right, Andy, was that it wasn't just like an interesting conversation. It was like an education. He's a very impressive person. I mean, I felt educated by him. You know what I mean? It was like he knows his stuff. I was actually, the conversation was about skiffle, right? This sort of music that they made in the late 50s and 60s. I heard this name, skiffle, and it's like, some part of me thinks it's like a flat. Is it a flat thing that you fry something with, or is it like,
No, my dad's 85, and my dad's told me what that skiffle was.
Right, yeah,
he grew up in the time, so he knows what it is.
That generation, I kind of knew something to do with music, and I thought, well, I've got to find out about skiffle. So, and of course, Billy Bragg's written a book on it, and for him, he talks about skiffle as being like the first punk. It was like first DIY music that people could make for themselves, in bars and in the kitchen, and you could hammer away with just a guitar and a sort of biscuit tin or something. So for him, it was like, this is what punk was, in the 50s. And so we did this interview, and I've got to say, man, it was like being schooled, and not just in skiffle, but like he's a proper guy, and just totally still completely committed.
Yeah, I think really like the creators like that is an artist like that. But they were going he's been going early 80s, wasn't he? So it's like it's to keep going as long as he has done, probably before that actually. But respect anybody that carries on that long.
Well, he always says he describes himself as a punk. So I guess he must have got going in the 70s, I suppose.
Yeah, must have been really one way or another. Either way, fantastic bloke. What I've heard. So I know people from a festival that have had him on still, and they told me what a great bloke he was still. And the time he headlined for them, and I won't name the festival, I couldn't get down. I could have got in for nothing as well, but happens, done it. So either way, Brilliant. Anyways,
he's still playing. I mean, he told me that I think he's meant to be touring this year, but like everybody else, it's been postponed and stuff. But he said he's not going to tour until he can. As we were talking earlier, he's not going to tour until he can go to the barbers.
I think that applies to all of us at the moment. That one, because people are wondering today. My hair is getting very long at the back, and it's the longest I've had it in about 10 years. And Stephen, I think yours is probably like I said, you need a good pair of clippers on it like mine, doesn't it? So
I'm getting worryingly close to having a mullet.
I tell you how bad my hair used to be when I was in my early 30s. It went straight down past my shoulders. My brother saw a picture of me and my partner recently, and he turned around and said to me, "Are you growing it that long again?" I said, "I don't want to." But if you can't get to the barbers, who knows what's going to happen?
Well, Billy Bragg refused to. I had to do my interview with him via Zoom, of course, but he refused to put his camera on because he said, "I don't mind, I don't mind doing face to face, but I don't want you to see my hair."
Oh, I love it! Oh, that's brilliant!
Lockdown hair.
And of course, people are wondering, we do have the video on today, but you're not going to see how bad our hair is.
No, please, no.
Anyway, that's pretty well my questions today, Stephen. Obviously, if people want to find out more about your band, where are the best going?
Yeah, so TuesdayWeld.com, WELD as in welding, as in, something that you get stick pieces of metals together. .com is the best thing to do. And or you can join us, of course, on the usual places, Real Tuesday Weld on Facebook and stuff. So yeah, I would love to hear from people. And thanks.
I know. I've seen you on Twitter. I've seen Instagram as well. So you've been on all the usual networks anyway.
All the usual stuff. Yeah. And listen, Andy, thanks a lot for inviting me. I really appreciate that. And
it's been great fun today. It's been great fun. I'm looking forward to when I'm back in the office next, whenever that is. Please know it's my job and be shielding at home. I've got your podcast about to subscribe to an iTunes, and it's brilliant. So I'm going to be because I can listen to a podcast and iPod in work. I'll be doing that first couple of days back in work in April.
Oh, thank you so much.
Brilliant. It's been a pleasure today, Stephen. So hang around, mate. We need to talk a quick bit further.
Good.
This is Andy N signing out. It's been a pleasure today. See you soon, guys.
Spoken, mate.